For me, sport started very, very young. I'm ADHD, and back then it was known as hyperactivity. And I was very, very fortunate that the headmaster and mistress of my school just threw me into sport, and it became my coping mechanism from the age of about 9 up to now, where I'm 47 tomorrow. So yes, that's how I got into sport. Yeah, I was junior international in athletics when I was at school. That progressed at sort of comprehensive school. I've raced, where to start? Ironman, missed out on Kona qualification twice by one place, qualified for the World Half Ironman Championships in Florida. I'm the only athlete still to complete the Transalpine and the Transalp, which is one running event across the Alps and the other is mountain biking across the Alps. So yeah, I've raced a lot, but the racing stopped for me probably 2012 really, which was the first ever off-road Ironman, which I managed to place 8th in. But after that point, I wanted to go much more adventure sort of focused. Subconsciously, it was when I was about 13, which I've realised now. I had my own coach back then for athletics, and I'd go into school early in the mornings and we would train, and when my session finished, the younger kids had been watching, and I basically started helping them. So I would do bits with them, and subconsciously back then I kind of realised that I actually got a lot more pleasure from seeing other people's success within sport than my own, and so coaching kind of rose above my own ambitions within sport. If you're following a plan, stick with it. Don't try adding more to it. Don't stress and think that you're not doing enough and start to overload, because at this time now you could easily burn yourself out, which you don't want to do. Consistency is super, super important. So just keep the consistency going. Don't necessarily worry about massive, big training weekends. Just keep your weekly consistency going at the right intensities and you'll all be fine. I mean, I've worked with, I think, we've got Naomi Freyrick, who's 3 times national 24-hour ladies champion. She was a European champion. There was Matt Jones, who was European champion and national champion. There's Carwyn Davies, who was under 23s champion. There's Steve Day, 3 times world single speed champion. Multiple others that have done well in events, not maybe at that level, but at other events. And the thing is, everybody's different. Right. So there's certain training principles that you can apply broad stroke that will work and that will work for everybody, but you've got to look at the individual and how they respond to different stresses and strains, and predominantly, as I know we will get on to talking about, is the psychological aspect of 24-hour racing. So physiologically, bar obviously having disabilities, we're all the same, and so those elements of training can become quite easy to manage. But how we deal with the person's mental approach to training and racing is very, very different. So normal training approach is 80% aerobic, 20% anaerobic. With something like this, you could probably go 85% aerobic, 15% anaerobic. Depending on the course, say if it's Fort William, you need to have some punchy strength at times, which you'll see a bit more anaerobic, but 85% is going to be aerobic. And the only way we get better at that is doing the boring. It's the most boring training. But say you ride a lap on one day and you're riding it, say, in 20 minutes at a base heart rate of 150. In 4 weeks' time, you would ride that in 19 minutes at a base heart rate of 150 if you followed the correct intensity.
Right.
And that means you've then got fitter aerobically, and that means your body can sustain it. As soon as you start to fluctuate and come out of that, your body burns super fast, and it also gets confused as to what you want to do. Teach it the right pattern, it locks onto it, it'll do it. Confuse it. That's why most people with their training, they never really get anywhere, because they go out sporadically and just do randomly. And what you're doing is you have to shock your body's homeostasis, your balance. But if you shock it too much, it just resets. But if you shock it just enough, it realizes it needs to develop, and so it will progress. And most people end up just confusing it, shocking it too much, and so it just kind of stays at one place. And the other one, which people never really get told, is any training response is primarily, firstly, a neurological response. So what happens is our brain tells our body to cope with the stress as we are. So say you're trying to develop that cardiovascular fitness, you're going out and you're doing runs or rides each day or whatever, the brain's just going to say, okay, yeah, we just got to cope with this as we are, we've got to cope with this as we are. Then normally, 4 to 6 weeks, there's a switch, and the brain will say, we need to physically adapt to this. And this is, I find, a real frustration for people that start of January, the first New Year's resolution, they go to a gym and they finish in a joint because they've seen nothing. Well, no one's actually telling them, well, your brain's just allowing you to cope with the training stresses as you are physically. You've got to get beyond that. And again, these time frames, they vary for individuals, but you've got to get beyond it before the body will then go, oh yeah, we do need to burn some fat, or we do need to put on some muscle, or we do need to do this. It's down to you at the end of the day. You know, people can come to me, but if you come to me and you don't have your why, I can't give you your why. That's where people get confused between drive and motivation. Motivation is very fickle. It can be something really, really simplistic that just suddenly inspires you. You see a video or someone says something and you go off and you do because you're motivated. But the drive, which comes from your why, is yours. Now, some people, a lot of introverts will have, like myself, historically it was my family. It was, why am I racing? Here I am at this race. I can't stuff this up because I've missed time with family. And that was a real deep why for me back then. Other people, it can be more materialistic if they want that trophy or finance or whatever. But the why has to be yours. It can't be given to you, or else it just, that's why on a 24 hours when it's really minging miserable and you've had to change your clothes again and you've had a puncture and you've had a, if it's someone else's why, you'll sack it off. So you have to ask yourself the question, how you feel in the darkness. And there's some athletes, again, that thrive in it and actually put themselves into that place and they know that's their strength, and so they will push through, like Steve. It's an opportunity in the dark where others feel they need the daylight to help them, and they feel that they need to be able to see things around them to actually act as a mental boost, which sort of like distracts them. But if you can actually block that stuff out and embrace the darkness and hone in on what your job is and your task is, you follow that light, and that's kind of it. You can kind of block everything else out. But it does take a strong mindset to do it.
Okay, so training in the dark would definitely be advantageous.
Spend as much time as you can riding in the dark, because you get that false sense of speed as well. When we're in the dark and we've got a good set of lights on us, it actually creates that feeling of we're travelling quicker. Whereas actually if you're checking in on your speedo, you might think, oh, I'm actually 2 miles an hour under. So make sure you are checking in on what your pace is as well. You basically need to take every opportunity for something like the Strathpuffer to put yourself in horrendous conditions and work out how you cope with that, how your equipment copes with that, from the bike to your lights as well and to your clothing, and how you mentally cope with it is really, really important. So one thing that I do with a lot of people I train, whether it's endurance or adventure, you deliberately put yourself into a horrible place. If it's the most disgusting weather outside, you say, now's the time I'm going to go out and train. And you see how you're going to do it. You don't think, oh, I know it's going to be brighter later on, I'll go out then. You just go out. And what you do in those horrible situations, that horrible weather, is you practice everything. You practice changing a tyre. You practice changing layers. You do it all in the disgusting weather, so there's no surprises left for your event. And this is something that's where these little nuances are really, really valuable, and I think are a real gem of what I try to include with the athletes I work with, so they are comfortable and know that they can deal with what gets thrown at them. Again, it comes back to the psychology of it. It's being able to lock your mind into that rhythm and just have a place that you can go and just keep going. A worse scenario is actually I train people that ski to the South Pole. Now that can be 40 to 50 days on their own in whiteout and there's nothing to see, and they just know they've got to get up, repeat and ski. So you've got to have that mental strength to just be able to lock yourself in your own world, which that would normally break a lot of people. So again, practicing that, making sure you're going out, say, on a really dark place, and lap past your own home is always a good one.
Mm.
Because if you're feeling weak and you know there's a cup of tea there waiting, you can be really mean and say have your partner there waiting with a cup of tea, almost coaxing you in, but you've got to keep going. And I've done that a lot before. It's quite cruel, which is in some ways I enjoy that maybe. But yeah, going past your own front door multiple times in a training session, that will start to stress the brain and build that strength. Is knowing your correct intensity that you can sustain.
Okay.
And then don't get carried away with it. If you get too carried away, it'll bite you in the butt later on, so to speak. I always say with all of my riders and different people is you get, depending on the lap length, a lap of grace at the start. So anxiety, etc., starts to heighten things and increases chemicals in our body and adrenaline, etc. And so you can ride on that for a while. But after that, you then need to drop in and hold your pace, your intensity, your heart rate, your power, etc. Know what that is and believe that that's what's going to get you to the finish line.